Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on what side of the pond you're on, and welcome to another extra special edition of Across the Pitch. My name is Phil Kennedy, and I'm joined today again by Jake Anderson of AZ Sports 98.7, where we're going to talk Phoenix Rising. Now, last weekend, as you know, Phoenix Rising did not have the result that they were looking for against San Diego. So we're going to take a look at that match and, maybe what went wrong there. Also look a bit ahead to Orange County this weekend. So welcome back to Across the Pitch, and thank you for joining us today, Jake.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Phil. Always glad to be back.
Yeah, so we were at the match last Saturday night, and one of the things that you had mentioned to me is that you thought that there was maybe a bit of a blueprint for beating Phoenix Rising that involved getting on the board first, and you thought that San Diego had kind of executed that. So why don't you tell listeners a little bit about what you were getting at with that whole blueprint?
Yeah, I don't know if it's so much a blueprint to beat them, but it's so much a blueprint to if you want to go in and more so, I think this is what teams will do to Phoenix in the playoffs is just park the bus, because in deep lines, you're not going to concede very, very much. And it goes to why they have so many shots, but not so many on target. And then obviously you can catch them on the counter. So when you do catch them on the counter a couple of times early, especially, then it allows you to have to sit, because even if you were to allow a goal, it's like, okay, well, we're only tied. Oh, well, we still have a 1-goal lead. I would say it's more so a blueprint to not lose more so than to win. But when you do happen to execute on a counter early, it really makes it hard, and it really puts more pressure on Phoenix, and it almost makes it so that you have more opportunities to have that counter attack. So, but it almost always seems to be that way with big clubs that have a lot of attacking prowess, that if you can just hold on for dear life, you may be able to catch them in numbers and have a high quality chance. So not necessarily a blueprint to beat them, but if a playoff blueprint were to be made, I think that would be the game plan to follow.
Now, you mentioned two things. You mentioned parking the bus and counter-attacking, and I think that, obviously Orange County is an example of a team that's been successful doing that against Phoenix Rising. There's a few other teams. I know there was a Tulsa game last year at Tulsa where they really kind of ended up winning but struggled more than they should have. With the San Diego game, and Coach Schultz, he kind of went on Twitter right after the game and said, you know what, in the first half, I was out coached pretty much, not in those exact words, but, he kind of went on and owned it right away. My observation is I really expected San Diego to, like you said, park the bus, really work the counterattack, and that was definitely how they were getting a lot of their goals. But I almost think that they came out with a little bit more aggressive game plan than I expected, and maybe that's part of what caught Rising off guard.
I agree with you in that regard, Phil. I definitely was impressed how, not easily, but their ability, San Diego's ability to pass through the press of Phoenix Rising. And that's not something that's easily done. A lot of the times you'll see teams make an error. In fact, the opening 20 seconds against San Diego on Saturday, there was a turnover that led to a Junior Fleming shot. And I thought it was going to be more of the, okay, here we go. This is going to be a Phoenix Rising, gets a lot of shots, gets a lot of high quality shots off turnovers, but not so. It was passed through Phoenix Rising's press, and they made a couple mistakes, and those mistakes end up costing them goals. It's kind of the Achilles heel of having the ball so much. When you have these moments with the having to score goals, like you see that happen with Man City. You make one mistake and it turns into a goal. So I do agree with you though that San Diego, they didn't come out praying to hold on for dear life. They definitely were trying to take it to them. I mean, and look at the form they're in. They've beaten Now, Phoenix Rising, they've beaten LA and OC 3 games in a row.
Yeah, I mean, I was really impressed, and everything that you said there are points that I was thinking of myself, especially what you said there with Fleming's at the beginning of the game. Because one of the things I usually do on Twitter is I'll go on and I will take like a video of the opening kickoff in just like the first 10 seconds of the game and post that on Twitter, like, kind of here we go type of thing. And that was the first time that video of the opening kickoff actually included a legit scoring chance. Was, that, like you said, it was right off the opening kickoff, and it was like, here we go. But then it just seemed like, there was a lot of new players that San Diego picked up, or not even so much new players, but good players. Of course, Rubio Rubin was the guy with the hat trick. He was only in his third game for San Diego, so he maybe didn't quite have a whole lot of film on him. The guy that really impressed me, though, was Tariq Morad. He was the other center back that they brought in. Grant Stoneman, he just seems to be a real stud for them. Even though he did end up getting sent off at the end, he gets his yellow cards and things. But I noticed that Morad, he was kind of playing a sweeper mode. And then Stoneman was able to play up and kind of facilitate a little bit more. And I thought that was a real key for them.
I think it's funny whenever you talk about games and who impresses who the most. And everyone seems to have a different player that impresses them, because we've had the press conference yesterday with Rick, and I believe Alejandro Guido was the guy that he picked out as the guy he saw that impressed him most. And for me, obviously, it would have been Rubio Rubin, just because he had a first half hat trick. But what impresses me about that is you don't have as many opportunities, and it's what you did with those opportunities, and the finishes were top class. I mean, they were just in the corner. But like you said, the changes they've made, that they've brought in, have definitely improved the team. It's improved the form. Like I just spoke up with the form they're in. It's going to be interesting to see if they end up getting in the playoffs. They need some help just because they have already played a couple more games than everybody, but it's definitely probably going to be, this is the group of death. Would you say? I mean, I think Phoenix in good shape, but in terms of who they're playing, and I think Rick hit it on the head when he said, you're playing teams that are playing for their playoff lives. You're going to be playing nothing but the most desperate teams. And it's not like it'll ease up, once the regular season's over. Now we literally are in the playoffs. So it's going to be a fun, but definitely interesting tune-up, I'd say, and test. And honestly, and then that was the last question I asked in the press conference on Tuesday, was how do you manage resting once you have officially, clinched the group? How do you manage rest versus wanting to still have home field advantage in the playoffs and try to have the highest seed possible? Because as of right now, it's looking like they're going to be the 4 seed maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a difficult group. And that was something that I kind of caught on to early, is that just the points per game for this group was so much higher than the other groups. And that was really before San Diego got better. That was before Las Vegas got better. I mean, they brought in so many new players that the groups just keep getting better. And like you said about, everybody that you talk to, sees kind of a different guy that sticks out to them. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because Kevin of PRFC Fan Show, I ran into him at halftime, and he couldn't stop talking about Miguel Berry, who is the midfielder that they brought in. So, I mean, they just do have so many impressive pieces that they brought in from San Diego. And Jake, I know you watch hockey a little bit, and in hockey, one of the things they emphasize on defense is not to let the attacking team build up speed through the neutral zone, which would be the hockey equivalent to the midfield center line area. And to me, on all three of those goals, what happened was there was just too much speed got built up through the midfield. And by the time that it got to our back line, our defenders, they just didn't have a chance because the attack was just coming 100 miles an hour at them. And to me, the midfield needed to do a better job of slowing them down to give the defenders a chance.
I think that's where you see the turnover being caused or created, and that's where the break starts or happens. It's right around midfield or maybe slightly, in San Diego's half. This let's take this for example, and you win it there, and then once you get slightly past the midfield, maybe to the blue line, so to speak, that's when you're on an absolutely full counter attack mode. And that's why I was so impressed with Rubio Rubin, because his ability to take the ball from the quote unquote blue line and do it himself
Yeah.
and not make a mistake and not lose the ball and to actually be able to finish and just take most of your chances. And then that's honestly, that's what you have to do when you're going against a team that's is better than you or you expect to be attacking you more. And if you can do that, and then it goes into the formula I was talking about, you can do that. That is absolutely pivotal to then be able to play defense and you allow 2 goals and still win a game against Phoenix Rising.
Yeah, and now this is going to kind of actually pivot towards the next thing that I wanted to talk about. But there was some conversation about maybe if Darnell King was specifically man marking or to steal another hockey term, shadowing Ruben. Do you know if there was ever any clarification if that was indeed the case, where it was King, kind of assigned to Ruben during the first half at least?
I have not heard anything definitively about that. I guess I would have to go back and rewatch and specifically look for that, but I didn't notice that specifically. It's not something that I think Rick Schantz has done. It's not something at least I've heard Rick Schantz doing very often. It's more so a team aspect of defense. It's more so whatever position you happen to be, wherever the ball is in relation to you. That's you understand your assignment in that time, in that moment. I don't know, but
Yeah,
maybe I don't know.
I've not heard of Chance doing that either, and it's would seem extremely odd for even though Ruben did have such a great game. I mean, it's only going to be in his third game. I mean, I don't think there would be any reason to be like, okay, well, this is a guy we need to watch out for. Let's just do something that we've never done before. But that's where it kind of pivots into the next thing I wanted to kind of talk about is so on Twitter, I saw some people discussing that perhaps King was man marking Ruben is where that came from, but obviously not just on Twitter, but in the fan ratings, the media ratings, and in general, things went pretty hard against Darnell King on Saturday. And one of the things I wanted to kind of ask you is that as good and as successful as Phoenix Rising have been, at the end of the day, it is still a second tier team in the United States. I mean, it's not the Premier League. It's not even the MLS. It's the USL. Do you think that, maybe sometimes our fans are a little bit too tough on our players when maybe somebody has an off night?
I think that's kind of the norm we've come to see now with top tier teams. When you are so successful, you just expect 3 points and you expect everything to go like it did last year when you won 20 games in a row and broke every record. I think it's understandable how these players make mistakes. Like you said, they aren't the best division, or they aren't in the best level of the pyramid in the United States, and even there's a higher level completely from that level. Speaking of
Right.
Europe, so I think it might just come with the fact that they have been so successful as a team that when you end up tying games or you end up losing games, when last year, for example, Darnell King, he blasted that volley from close range. Well, that's Amadou Dia last year. Maybe that's a goal, and maybe Rising ends up winning that game 4-3 instead of losing 3-2. And this is a completely different conversation. and you get used to that type of feeling, and you come to maybe, I don't know, have too high expectations. That would be my thinking into why fans are so hard on players each game. But I think it's something that we've seen Rick talk about and mention, in that, 3 years ago you could tie on the road and nobody cared, and now you tie at Vegas and everyone wants Rick's job. It's a completely different feeling. You've had to have had success for these feelings to happen, because I don't think anyone really, I mean, people do care obviously, but when a team's bad, no one is that emotional about a loss.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good thing, and I think that having a rabid fan base is something that is certainly unique about Phoenix Rising in the USL, and I think that we have the best fans in the league and the best fans in the whole United States. For in my opinion, I just wonder if sometimes people kind of forget what they're watching. I mean, I'll give an example. So in the Premier League, I support Arsenal, and I get on Mesut Ozil pretty hard. But the reason I get on Mesut Ozil is because he's on 350K a week. He's not even playing. I just think maybe with Phoenix Rising, maybe sometimes fans aren't putting into perspective that, sometimes a lot of the people sitting in the stands probably make more at their job than the guys who are watching on the field in a lot of cases. And, it's just, maybe understand that it's a fantastic team, but it's not guys that are on $1 million contracts that are expected to be perfect sometimes. And, I feel for the players sometimes when I get on Twitter after the games, because I don't have any doubt that there's anybody on Phoenix Rising that's doing anything but playing for the love of their game and leaving their all on the pitch every night.
I mean, but this is what they signed up for, isn't it? I mean, as professionals, not that it's right, not that it's wrong, but it just comes with it. The scrutiny of, you're paid to do this. You're a professional. That's an interesting point. Putting it the way you just put, with the talking about the salaries, how there definitely are some folks in the stands that make more than these guys do, and some of them obviously are more talented than others. The Junior Flemings of the world, we're going to see wherever his career ends up going, but it definitely is an interesting dynamic, like you said. But I do agree. I mean, at some times you have to remember what you're watching, but I think, for example, Darnell King, he and Rick kind of touched on this yesterday. He looks to be, because technically he is out of position, but in Rick's system, a fullback goes up and he gets replaced by Kevin Lambert. And so a goal might come from that side because, quote unquote, Darnell King is gone, but a guy is still there to fill his void, and it just happened to still be a counter in numbers, but it wasn't as if he's completely vacant. So it is part of the antithesis of Rick Schant's system. That's the weakness of it, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not trying to say that anybody's right or anybody's wrong or anything like that. I was just kind of, trying to get your idea, perspective of, whether or not some fans out there maybe are expecting too much out of a second division team. But it's an excellent point that you make that, these are professionals. This is what you signed up for. And these guys ultimately are trying to work their way to the top level. And like you mentioned, I mean, certainly a guy like Flemings, I think that, Coach Schatz has certainly alluded to that he probably doesn't expect that Flemings will be at this division next season. You look at other guys like, Solomon Asante, he maybe has the talent to play in a higher division. Maybe, a Kevin Lambert, he's a guy that probably has the talent to play in a higher division. But ultimately, it is going to be a roster mostly of guys that are playing at this division because this is division they play at.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to have a full roster getting transitioned to a new team every year. That'd be absurd. You'd be a factory. But I think it's also interesting because the team kind of has, in a way, become a quote unquote a factory or a feeder team, whatever you want to call it, and that you have kind of the backups already. I mean, Sean said it yesterday. Santi's already on contract for next year. I think Santi Moar already, you got to be ready to say it. He's the starting left winger for the 2021 Phoenix Rising.
Let's talk about him because he's a guy that I think this is something that came up in the press conference, and it's something that I had noticed, and something that I know you had noticed, where he had gotten off to the slow start with the injury and maybe kind of in and out of the lineup. But the last 2 weeks, he has looked like a superstar.
Yeah, I've been saying ever since he kind of got back from the sending off, he just had an unlucky start. He had the injury, like you just mentioned, wasn't able to play in the first game. And then we had the COVID break. So we never saw Santi play. And then when we did see him play, we saw him get sent off and we didn't get to see him. And so that was our first taste of Santi Moar and for Phoenix Rising other than the preseason. So we didn't get to see Santi that we know, the Santi of New Mexico that we saw, that we knew was very talented. And we're beginning to see, and we even have seen what he can do. He's just gotten unlucky. He's hit at least 2 posts by my count. And then he isn't getting on the score sheet, but he's having so much of an emphasis on the attack, and he's being so unselfish and giving, Rufat an easy tap. I mean, he easily could have taken himself. And even this past weekend, he got so unlucky on an unbelievable save by San Diego's keeper.
Oh yeah, that one. We were basically standing right above that, and the sound that it made when Kippen stopped that ball, he had to have felt that one the next morning. There had to have been a bruise there because I mean, Moore could have been more than 3 or 4 yards out and just blasted it, and somehow Kippen kept it out. But that was just it was point blank, and I don't think a lot of keepers are going to make that save.
Kippen had a rough game. He ended up getting roughed up even later in the game in the second half. But that was another example of just kind of Santi's year. I think it's just kind of those. You just got to get through it. Just keep playing, and we've seen what he can do. He's playing to the level we know, and I think Jordan Schweitzer is another one. When he plays, he's constantly producing. And I think if Kevin Lambert were to walk away, I think Schweitzer easily walks in as the replacements. And oddly enough, Lambert and Junior are both younger, and Jordan Schweitzer and Santi Moar are both a little bit older, and so will be their placements.
Yeah, I mean, Schweitzer's a guy I've really wanted to see more of this year. And I mean, to me, and this is a question I want to kind of put to you, do you think that maybe going to a little bit more defensive-oriented midfield, say maybe like a Bakero, Schweitzer, and Lambert instead of a Stanton, might help slow down some of those attacks coming through the midfield? Do you think, our wingers and our forwards are going to give us enough goals that, maybe go with 2 defensive minds, maybe have a true number 6 and a true number 8?
I think therein lies where which Phoenix Rising you're going to get on a particular night would be. Honestly, it kind of would tilt what way it's going to lean. And what I mean by that is, if you were to put in a Jordan Schweitzer and take out like you said, like a Stanton, or take out a Bakero, I think you're now taking away, in a sense, one attacking option when you are in the attacking third. And, you only have so many options while you're up there. And Phoenix Rising hasn't really proven to be a team that's going to slice through you. I mean, I made a comment to Owen Evans during the game on Saturday. It's not a good sign when AJ Cochran's the one trying to split the defense in 2 to get the balls to your forward. That's not a good sign. You're going to have guys like John Bakero who can make those passes. So I guess what I'm getting at is, if you were to have a Jordan Schweitzer in there, you're going to have a more defensive, maybe having to play more of a counter-attacking style, still pressing, but you won't have as many options and you won't have as many opportunities, I guess. At least you won't have as many attacking options in those opportunities. I think that's why Rick continues to play Sam Stanton, who, especially something I noticed on Saturday was Rufat, when he would go to one side or the other, he would pull the trailing center back with him just so slightly to cover that space in case of a cross. And then the backdoor midfielder, which happened to be Stanton most of the time, or Whelan actually, would then fill that space. So that's the option that I'm talking about specifically if you're looking at a certain play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I definitely see what you're saying there, and certainly with having to move Corey over to the right back position, then he had at one point in the season, I know he was leading the team in passes completed. So, he was really the guy that was starting the attack. Now that he's moved over to a fullback, he can't quite be that starting point the way that he is in the center. One question I wanted to kind of ask you about it, and this goes back to how we've been, reorganizing the defense and kind of in the light of what you've been talking about, is in the off season. I mean, obviously with Amadou Dia leaving, that was a big deal, but he was a guy going to the MLS. The guy that left that I was really confused why we didn't bring back and that I thought was going to hurt us was Mustafa Dumbuya, and he went to Tampa Bay, another USL team. So it wasn't like he was jumping up to the MLS or anything. Do you know why they didn't bring Dumbuya back? Because I mean, it just seems to be like, he's a guy that maybe we could really, really use right now.
I do not know why they didn't, but I want to say that they didn't choose for that to happen based on some comments Rick has made. I mean, I've heard him talk about literally, say, could you imagine if we had Mustafa Dumbuya paired up with Darnell King on the left?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it might have just been maybe a preference or something. Maybe he has family over there. I don't know. We would just be speculating. But for whatever reason, he's not here. But I don't think it was something that was by choice. I mean, and obviously they did what they did in the offseason to try to address it. And going back to what you said about Corey Whelan, I think bringing in a guy like Damion Lowe, I think seeing the little that we saw, he's going to end up being a starting center back here by the time the playoffs come around. And I think he'll be the guy who will be starting these attacks.
Yeah, let's actually talk about that. I don't want to blow any of your secrets here or anything like that, but you did have a chance to talk to him today, so just kind of give our listeners maybe a summary of a few things that you learned about him today.
Oh, well, he's one of the reggae boys, so it was cool to get a take on what it's like to play with Junior and Kevin and get a glimpse of what it's like to have a guy who plays with two guys that we get to see and cover so much and get another objective from the Jamaican national team. And he's just a competitive guy. I mean, he knows he's a talented player. I was impressed how he was able to stay in shape and how he's already playing after not playing for so long. And he just is an absolute competitor, and he knows he's a professional. He's confident. So I think he's a good addition. I'm excited to see him play more. Rick said yesterday he's a match fit for 90 minutes, but he doesn't quite know when he'll be in that starting 11.
Yeah, I mean, I was really surprised, like you said, because I was kind of telling everybody all week, oh, yeah, he's not going to be ready. If he comes in, it'll be like 2 minutes at the end just to get his appearance so he could qualify for the playoffs. But then, here he was coming in and playing 15 minutes, like he said. And at the press conference, I know Rick was asked if he would be in the starting lineup, which is, of course, something he doesn't give away. But he didn't say no, and I want to kind of gather that maybe we will see him in the starting lineup. If I had to bet one way or the other, I think that we will see him in the starting lineup this week.
Yeah, I believe just the comment about him being available for a full 90. I mean, he told me today he's ready to play a full 90. So he would definitely be playing it or starting next week, meaning against OC, or excuse me, against San Diego on the 30th. But I would definitely expect to see him in the starting lineup no later than Los Dos, which is the last game of the season,
Yeah.
because they didn't bring him in to not play. This is a position of need. This wasn't a position of want. This was something that they needed to address. And I think they did a phenomenal job in getting a player of that quality for, that value for the dollar.
Yeah, and I think that we saw that last week why it's a need, because I think when we went to this back four in Vegas with Corey on the right, and then we had Farrell and AJ at the center now, I know that in one of the press conferences that Rick had said against a big team with big forwards like Las Vegas, it would be effective, but he had some concerns if you got into a team that had smaller, quicker forwards that maybe it wouldn't be as effective. I think that Rubio Rubin fit into that smaller, quicker mold, if you will. It did give that back line some trouble. So I think that was a bit prophetic on Rick's part that that was a lineup that was really going to be effective against certain teams. And that's why we do need a Lowe to bring in and have somebody that's maybe a little bit more athletic at that center back position. Because when you have AJ and Joey Farrell in there, I mean, they're both big, strong guys that are good on the ball, good in the air, but neither one of them has a tremendous amount of pace.
No, yeah. Obviously Corey Whelan was obviously the first choice center back, just because he had that perfect combination of being quick but also being strong and having ability technically with his feet and being able to distribute. So like we said, if it's not this weekend, it's going to definitely be Wednesday, and if not, it 100% will be by Los Dos. We'll see what this back four, this new back four and solidified back four maybe is going to look like. And I'll ask you, who do you think will it be? Will it be AJ Cochran or will it be Joey Farrell that is sad? I think Joey will get sad, and I think they'll pair Lowe with AJ because he seems to like AJ's ability to pass a little bit more than Joey's.
Yeah, I mean, I think with AJ, you're going to get a guy who gives you more in terms of in the box on set pieces, being able to score. Like you said, that passing ability. They're both big. They're both good in the air. With Farrell, I think he's a little bit better on the ball. I think he's going to be more of a guy that's going to get in there and block some shots and things like that. But to me, Rick tends to trend towards the guy that's going to give you a little bit more on offense. And I think that's why AJ has been the starter most of the year. That was why we saw the Calistri experiment at right back, where Rick is going to look to, if you have a guy that's a 5 out of 10 on offense and a 7 out of 10 on defense, or you have a guy that's going to be a 6 out of 10 on offense and a 6 out of 10 on defense, I think that Rick's going to go with the guy that's going to give you the little bit more offense over the guy that's going to give you the little bit more defense, if you will.
And to go off that point, Damion Lowe is not a short or weak guy at all either. He's a big, stocky guy. He's good in the air and set pieces. We keep hearing Rick talk about Kevin Lambert's next step after, mastering or at least developing the next step in his career of his technical ability is that set piece ability. I mean, we kind of did see it. Rufat kind of stole a goal from him a couple of games ago, but Damion Lowe set piece quality, that's something I'm looking forward to as well. And like you said, we've seen both Joey and JJ score. Last game, I think they both had a chance actually, and neither capitalized on it. And the guy who did with his head of all people was Junior Fleming. So it'll definitely be interesting to see who ends up being that back four. But hopefully for our sake and getting to cover them, they keep playing and they got to keep winning. So hopefully they can figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big thing is kind of every game is a must-win game. That the playoffs really start now. I don't think that there's any more drop points. So I think this is a good time for us to kind of talk about the Orange County match that's coming up. Now of course, we played them twice at Orange County. The first one was a draw. The second one was a loss. It was a pretty rough point in the season for us. Orange County is coming to our yard for the first time this year. Now, this is a crazy series because I think this will be the 23rd or 24th time that these two teams have met, which is just insane considering they've only been around for like 6 years apiece, but they seem to always just end up playing each other like 3-4 times during a year. We've always really, really struggled going to OC. I think that Western Conference Championship game is about the only game I could ever remember us winning there. When they come here, it's been a bit of a different story. We've kind of bossed them around here for the most part. I think that the guys are going to have those last two games on their mind, maybe a little bit of a vengeance game, all of what we saw against New Mexico with that 5-2 win earlier this year. I think that's a best case scenario. What do you think?
Well, obviously the teams don't like each other. We saw that on the pitch. And like you said, having dropped points both times, the team is definitely going to be motivated in wanting to avenge, like you said, those drop points. And if you look at OC's just recently, I mean, they did win against Las Vegas last time out, but before that, they had lost 3 games in a row. And they were also they lost to San Diego, just like Phoenix Rising did, but they've also faced good teams, such as Sacramento. Then they lost to LA. So it's not like they're in a great run of form either. And they're going to be desperate, like Rick keeps telling them. And desperate teams are scary, and especially when you're rivals. But something that I think you noticed during the press conferences, if you're there after the games, the guys always talk about being at home and being on, they say our pitch, the field we practice on. And, that was a big talking point in those 2 matches where Phoenix Rising didn't get to play on their pitch. They got to play on, whatever it was up there. So I think that, and, as petty as that may sound, it does make a difference when you have different lengths of grass and whether the grass is dead or not, whether the grass is alive or watered or whatever it may be. But I think it'll be a game that we'll see. I think Rick will deploy, his normal 11 that we've been seeing. And I think Lowe will be in it, honestly.
No, that's a good point that you make, because that was the biggest thing that concerned me about last week. Is, to me, road losses or road draws or drop points on the road are one thing, because I mean, it's just, it's the road. No matter what league you're in, the road is tough. But this season, especially, Casino Arizona Field had been an absolute fortress. And to me, especially like last year, once they lost the first home game to Salt Lake, that really seemed to be a bigger confidence loss to them than maybe their loss on the road was. And to me, they really kind of never recovered from that game. Do you think that losing a home match is going to be something that is a big dent in their confidence? Is that something that concerns you, where it's like, ooh, now they've lost at home and you're kind of feeling more unsure after a home loss?
Well, I think this is going to be the ultimate test, and a test that they really need to be able to prove to themselves that they can pass and they can respond to it, not make it a habit. Because if they do make it a habit, it's going to be the 3rd consecutive season in which a Phoenix Rising team that has a big lead in first place begins to drop points, no matter where they're playing at the end of the season, and they kind of limp into the playoffs. And 2018, it didn't end up affecting them. Obviously, they ended up making to the final, but and in 2019, we saw what happened. They didn't go in with the best of form. They kind of peaked early. So it's definitely going to be a test, and you're going to be playing the quality of playoff opponent, and you'll be able to make mistakes and not be eliminated. But hopefully you don't have the wobbles again that we've seen, because it would be the third consecutive year.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you make. And to me, that's kind of one of the things I'm holding out hope for. It's like you said, last year they peaked early. They had that 20-game winning streak. And in the middle of the winning streak, I know there was like a 5-game stretch where they won every game by at least like 3 goals. They were just firing on all cylinders. We haven't seen that yet. And, maybe this is just going to be one of those inconsistent teams. It ends up looking like world beaters one night, and then the next week looks like they did last week. And let's hope that's not what it is, because what we haven't seen is this team really get on a roll where they peak and go for 5, 6, 7 games where they're just firing on all cylinders, and never a better time for that to happen than right now with 3 games of the playoffs to go. Maybe just go out and win those 7.
Yeah, and to go off what you just said about not seeing them at the form that we saw last year, and maybe that goes to, should you be expecting to see that kind of form again? Was that a one-off year? Was that a record setting, and we'll never see that for decades? So who knows? And then just looking at stats from this year, Phoenix Rising's tied with Reno for the lead in the most goals in the entire league. Phoenix Rising has the best goal difference in the Western Conference, and they have the second best in the entire league. They have, what is it? Their defense isn't the best. It's like the 7th in the West in terms of goals allowed, which obviously isn't great, but still. So their defense.
I know that it was last week. Phoenix had 13 goals allowed, and then like San Diego and OC both had 12 goals allowed. So it wasn't until they allowed those 3 last week that before that, I think they were like 3rd in the West in goals allowed. So it was that 3 last week knocked them down a few pegs.
Oh yeah. And most of the best defense is Pittsburgh. Don't quote me on that, but I think the number is 8 is the amount.
I was just talking in the West. I know that the East always has way better defense.
Yeah, but just in terms of the overall numbers, when you want to compare, okay, we hear Phoenix has allowed 16 goals. Well, who's the best? What are we looking at here? Is it 4? Is it 12? It's kind of where are we at? And I was just trying to give the full spread there.
Okay, so it looks like Pittsburgh has 8 goals allowed all season, which is the best of anybody. And then Tampa's right behind it with 9 goals allowed. Louisville is 11. Those are all in the Eastern Conference, but then you come over to the
San Antonio is the best in the West with 11.
Yeah, with 11, and then then OC was 12. So I mean, it's just always been one of those things in the USL, at least the past few years, where the higher scoring teams seem to be in the West. But one thing you were talking about that I wanted to kind of ask you about it, and I think this is kind of what you were alluding to, is I think one thing, and this goes back to the 20-game winning streak or even the 2018 team. I think that one of the things that goes unnoticed is just how much better the other teams in the USL have gotten. I think the league itself and just the teams around us have gotten exponentially better over the past few years. Because like when I look at the 2018 team compared to the talent that we have now, I just feel like we have far superior players now than we did with that team that went all the way to the championship. But then the teams that we're playing against are a lot better than we were playing against 2 years ago also. And I think that factors into, why we don't see these 10, 20-game winning runs is like you keep saying, it's a group of death. These teams we're playing are good, and maybe some of the credit just needs to go to the opponent.
And that's a good point you just made about both the team and also the teams around them equally, or maybe trying to keep up as well in talent. But I think the reason for that, and you can easily just look at the group standings. In each group, you have some really, really, really bad teams too, and so you had almost the mid-tabled teams, quote unquote, don't exist anymore. You had in some regards. So you had that handful of teams that are going to be good in the West, which are, I'd say maybe 4, 5, 6 teams, and then you'll have a handful in the middle. But then you have some really bad teams in the West, and I think those are the teams that everyone kind of stacks their points up against. And then when they duke out who's going to get that 1 through 5 amongst themselves. But that is a good point, that as talented as the team was in 2018, I think this team is better. But at the same time, Reno is proving to be just as good. San Diego didn't even exist back then, and they're proving that they can hang. And Sacramento, even though they just lost, they have proven that they can hang just as well as Reno can. So there is definitely a lot of talent, and it's gonna be fun. I'm hoping, like I said, Phoenix has a good playoff run, but it's gonna be interesting because I think they're gonna have to do it on the road after that if they can get past that first round, which is not going to be easy because it looks like they're going to be playing Sac.
Well, hopefully they can win the next 3 games and maybe get a little bit of help and get some home matches. But yeah, I mean, Reno's a great example because, I mean, Reno, they're a team that was already good. They already had a great player in this league in Corey Hertzog. And then they go in and they bring in a guy like Foster Langsdorff. I mean, that's some real firepower.
No, and then we've seen it on the field. That's why they're tied with Phoenix for the most goals, and they're able to do it defensively too. They're only 1 goal allowed more than Phoenix. Their goal difference is only 1 less, so they're third in the league. So Reno is evidence of what the best team or one of the best teams in the league is, and we've seen the test. So obviously it's a quarterfinal matter. Excuse me. Overall quarterfinal, it would be the Western Conference semis. That is a potential matchup should Phoenix get there. They would be playing Reno again, unless you have whoever is in Group B coming out, which who knows at this point.
Yeah, I mean it's a dogfight. I mean it really is. You've got OC on 21, Los Dos on 22, San Diego on 23. Now I have to say that's as we sit right now because San Diego and Los Dos are playing and tied at 0-0 as we're recording this, which is on Wednesday night at 7:23 p.m. Phoenix time, just for the record. But Jake, I think we've had a great conversation here, and we've definitely covered a lot of ground. But let's wrap up with a score prediction here for the Orange County match, and I'll let you go first.
Oof. Okay. Well, let's see. It was low scoring both times in OC. I think that was by design. Let's see. I'm going to say there's definitely going to be a goal or 2. I don't think Rising will get a clean sheet. I'm going to go with a gritty 2-1 win for Phoenix Rising.
2-1. All right. I've had a million different thoughts about this, and part of me says that, is this going to be one of those New Mexico United games where it ends up like 5-2 because Phoenix just wants to say, you know what, we want to show our rival who's boss tonight. But this deep into the season, it was so much on the line. I don't think that we see anything near this. I think we're going to see a physical game. I would honestly be surprised if we don't see somebody get sent off in this one. I'm going to go 1-0 Phoenix Rising. I'm going to say this is one of those ones that goes like 80th minute, it's 0-0, and somehow I'm going to say Well, I'm going to say that the new guy, Damion Lowe, heads one in at the 82nd minute, and Phoenix Rising gets the 3 points that way.
In front of the fans, in front of the crowd. Okay.
That would
That'll
be awesome.
I will definitely have to mention that in my story if that happens to be exactly what happens, or even if it's somewhat close.
No, I like to just have a little fun with the predictions and stuff like that. But, honestly, as long as we get 3 points, I'm a happy camper.
Yeah, and then it'll definitely the next step of Rick Shantz's life in trying to figure out planning the future for this team will have to be rest versus trying to get that seed, because that's the next step if you end up sealing the title, the Group B title.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I would say is that in this particular season, I don't think that rest is as big of an issue as it would be most years. Now, we do have the 2 games in the final week, which is a difficult situation. But at the end of the day, these guys have only played half as many games as they would in a regular season. They don't have that many minutes on their legs. So I say, in this situation, I don't want to risk resting guys. I don't, maybe if it's the last game of the season and no matter what we do, we can't move up or move down or something, then you rest guys. But, I would just kind of like to see them get their 11, play those guys every night. Maybe pull the guy off in the 60th minute if we got a big lead kind of thing. But it's just, it hasn't been a long enough season where most guys are at half the minutes they would have played in a regular year.
No, yeah, that's absolutely a great point, and that's why I think it'll be interesting to see if Rick feels the same way. And so if we're going to get full lineups and basically these are your tune-ups, kind of like the World Cup, you get those friendlies right before. This is kind of what that feels like. Not that these are friendlies, but these are going to be playoff tune-ups.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's playoff intensity from here on out. Absolutely.
That's the word, intensity. And also maybe not rest, but get everyone minutes so that they feel that they're ready if they need to be called upon. That's another way of looking at it as well.
Great point. Yeah, I mean, a guy like Jordan Schweitzer or even Kalistri, who hasn't played much recently, get those guys in because you're going to need all hands on deck to lift the big trophy. And, that's the only goal this year for Phoenix, I think.
Oh, yeah. And not just minutes against the team that you're beating 6-0, but against the team that is of playoff quality. Mm-hmm. And you get real minutes, not just, 10 minutes because you're up 5-0.
Absolutely. All right, Jake. Well, I really appreciate your time tonight. And, we've just had a fantastic conversation. We've talked so much Phoenix Rising here. And I will look forward to seeing you on top of the suites on Saturday night. And did you just want to plug your podcast with Damion Lowe again real quick before we wrap up?
Yeah, my podcast is the Uprising Podcast, which you can get on arizonasports.com. And then I'll be posting it on Twitter, which for me is at JWA1994. And Phil, thank you so much again for having me. Love being on. We talk about footy forever, and we're only stopping because you're saying so.
Well, I'm only stopping because we're at an hour now, and I don't know how much longer a podcast people listen to me. We try to keep them at an hour.
I hear you. I understand.
But yeah, I mean, definitely we should probably do this a few more times and hopefully all the way through the very final round of the playoffs.
Yeah, and those announcements came out just over the last few days that the final would be on November 1st, Sunday.
No, and the Phoenix Rising will play on ESPN regular, no ESPN 3, no Plus, no 2, just ESPN. Phoenix Rising will be on there this year. I'm calling it right now.
If they get to the final, yes. The rest of the playoffs will be on ESPN Plus.
Well, that's why I'm calling it right now. I'm calling right now that they're going to be on the main channel, the mothership.
We'll see. After last year, I don't want to get too excited. You don't want to get too ahead of yourself. Like they say, one game at a time.
Well, I'm trying to will a Phoenix Rising championship trophy. It's been way too long since the city has lifted a trophy.
That is something that I will say cheers to metaphorically, because I am in full agreement with you there. The city is dying for a winner.
Well, I think no matter what happens, we've definitely got a winner with this club, because I mean the one thing about Phoenix Rising and about football in general, it's not just a sports team, it's not just a soccer team. It's a part of the community, and the things that the club does with various charities and starting the youth teams and things like that. It's just fantastic to have Phoenix Rising in our community.
Yeah, and I think like one of the guys we were talking about earlier, Jordan Schweitzer, he's a perfect example of that. We keep seeing it every week. He does something with someone at Phoenix Children's Hospital. It seems like every week.
Incredible stuff. All right, Jake. Well, we like to end with an Up the Rising. So, Up the Rising.
Up the Rising.
Cheers.
Cheers.